Hawkins is going to come and share with us. Taylor, you come up. Taylor lives in Covington. He works with Co-Museo, so I think we need to give Taylor a hand for stepping in.
Appreciate it. Well, so good to be here. My brother works here in the city, and couldn't get him to get off work. He has this thing about getting a paycheck. Couldn't get him he works late sometimes, couldn't get him to get off work to join me here, but it's a pleasure to be here with y'all. And I'm sorry Cole couldn't be here. He is a much better speaker than I am, but thankfully he's doing well, and the doctors, they foresee no issues in the near future. But we'd appreciate your prayers. You never know how stuff in the hospital goes, especially these days. Well, our culture is really facing a dramatic war. And I think y'all would all recognize that. We're facing a culture war like we haven't seen in a long time. And I'm not talking about sensible people in the middle, and I'm not talking about sensible people like a lot of you in this room. I'm talking about people who are ignoring any sort of social mores of the past of our country. They're ignoring any sort of common ground that we have had in this country for so long. They're abandoning all that, and they're starting to say things like crime shouldn't be punished. Mm-hmm. Like the family unit is not an important part of society. Really appreciate the work of Jeff and his many years in law enforcement. I have so many relatives, close relatives who are in law enforcement, and I'm sure Jeff would say, and many of my relatives have said the same, that without a strong family unit, they have to deal with the consequences of that. Mm-hmm. And so our organization was started in 2017. It used to be Family Policy Alliance of Georgia, and we just last year, July 1st, transitioned to Frontline Policy Action and Frontline Policy Council. There's just a minor difference in what those two things do, but same organization, same people. Our goal is to protect family values here in the state. Our goal is to protect the right to religious freedom, the right to life, the right of your medical freedom, which has been an issue that's been increasingly at play in politics, both here in the state as well as nationally, and many other rights that families should not have to fight for and should not have to worry about, but they have had recently, because there is a battle for the culture. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier was the idea that that some radicals in our society are pushing that men and women aren't even different. They're the same thing. And that's something that that was new to me. So I had to take a look in the mirror and wonder, no, I didn't. I had a moment's hesitation. I'm sure no one else did here. And I'll tell you what's sad about that is the fact that ideology is being pushed in the classroom, has been pushed in the classrooms across much of America. Now, we're not talking about a majority of teachers. We're not even talking about a small minority of teachers. We're talking about a radically small number of radical teachers who are not doing the work of Dexter's wife, who had many years in the classroom, not trying to educate the next generation. They're trying to indoctrinate the next generation. And I feel that comes from a personal insecurity about who they are. We've abandoned those family values that I was talking about a little while before. We don't have any structural foundation for our morals anymore in society, and so people are left completely adrift to identify, to wonder about their core identity. Who am I really as a person? And in that insecurity, they're foisting an ideology, a radical ideology, onto our children, and that is absolutely unacceptable. And so our organization was founded to push back against that, to raise the voices of those who share common American values, common sense American values, conservative values, and of course family values. And so we've existed now for 4 years, and I'd like to talk tonight a little bit about the legislative wins that we experienced this past year in the legislature. Cole and I were down there at the Capitol every single day of session, fighting for these values that I'm talking about. And I appreciate the work of Senator Ginn, who had to step out, and so many other leaders who are willing to say, may not be politically correct to say anymore. It may not be the thing that gets all the applause from every side of the aisle, but we're going to do the right thing. And I appreciate that sort of leadership. So our organization testified over 30 times for different pieces of legislation. We had close to 100 meetings with legislators during the 40 days of session, and we had to put the pressure on them sometimes to do the right thing. And I'm thankful for a lot of our strong allies in the legislature. But just want to break down a few of the things that happened, because really this year was a historic year for conservative legislation. We saw some amazing things done in the legislature. Now, I do want to give you some encouragement. Not everybody that goes down to Atlanta becomes part of the Atlanta swamp. And it's a much smaller minority, but not even everybody who goes to Washington, D.C. is part of the D.C. swamp. And so I want to encourage you that that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We have to unite, especially for November. We have to make sure that we put good candidates in office. We have to make sure that we push back against the radicalism I've been talking about. Let me talk briefly about some of those policy wins. First one I want to talk about is House Bill 1084. And I know a lot of these numbers won't mean anything to you, and that's totally fine. They shouldn't have to, but House Bill 1084 made it a crime to bring those divisive ideologies into the classroom. It said that if you're a teacher and if you are pointing your finger at students and saying you're the way that you are because of your race, that you bear guilt because of your race, or that you are a victim because of your race, both of those things are not only wrong, they're deeply, deeply deplorable. Because what you're doing is you're victimizing kids based on the crimes of generations long since dead. And victimhood has been shown to be one of the predominant future indicators for lack of success. We should be building up our kids and telling them, you live in America, you live in the greatest country in the history of the world. And some, like I said, very small minority of teachers have not been doing that. And so that is now illegal. It's now illegal to promote those divisive ideologies and to preach racial essentialism, essentially, from the classroom. It's now illegal to do that. And another thing that we were pushing from day one, and it had to be tacked on to House Bill 1084, the last day of session, was Save Girls Sports. It's unconscionable that, like I say, these radical ideologies were allowing a fringe element to basically blackmail the rest of our society into believing that there is no difference between men and women. And so the Title IX requirements that we have an equitable playing field for women in women's and girls sports, the victories that that movements have been pushing for so long were about to be wiped away. And it was about to say, well, we'll have girls sports, but whoever identifies as a girl can be there. We'll have girls locker rooms, but whoever identifies as a girl can be in those locker rooms. Folks, that's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. And they estimate, even one incidence of this can have huge ripple effects. Because if there's one high school player who identifies as a female but who is a male, and they just take one spot on their team, and they win, they've kicked out, one person on their team. If they win the local championships, they've not only kicked out one spot on their team, they've eliminated one of the opportunities for scholarships at the local level. And if they go on to regional championships, they've eliminated another girl from their opportunity to compete at the regional level and to further elevate their abilities to get a scholarship and to go on for future success. So I won't continue to harp on that issue, but it is one of crucial importance. And I'm so glad that our governor was willing to come to the House of Representatives the last day of session, did something almost unprecedented. It has happened a few times, but it's very rare. He came to the floor of the House the last day of session with just hours left in the session, and he said, look, we've done amazing things. We've passed a $30 billion budget. We've given $1 billion back to taxpayers. All this is good stuff. Got rounds of applause, of course, for that, and those are important things. But then he said, we have to protect our girls and girls sports in our state of Georgia. And I'm so proud of him for doing that, and you should be proud of him for doing that too, because that is a major step. And I'm excited that we were able to save girls sports this year in Georgia. Another one I want to talk about is Senate Bill 226, the anti-obscenity bill. The left has exploited, and I'm talking about radicals again, I'm not talking about common sense liberals, has exploited a loophole in Georgia law that says that obscenity, you do not get a felony if you present obscene materials to minors as long as it's in a school. And that's a heinous exemption. That's a heinous exemption. It has led to drastically, one child being harmed by that is sad, is horrific. But when we dug through the research and we did our research, we found that all of these obscene materials being checked out hundreds and hundreds of times from middle school kids, high school kids in our state. And we're not talking about just one child. We're talking about many kids across the state. And so we worked to make sure that parents have the right to be heard, to remove those materials from the classroom, that the schools can no longer stonewall that effort. And that should be a dialogue as to what materials are available. It's not something you want all of the power to be in any one particular place, but there needs to be accountability for the parents, because parents have the right to dictate what their child is learning in the classroom. So we're holding students accountable and really excited for the win on that front. Now I'll talk about one that I'm sure you heard about, House Bill 1013. Who heard about the mental health bill, massive mental health bill that was going through legislation? It was a huge deal. It was a huge deal, massive piece of legislation. The goals were phenomenal. There were laudable goals that they were seeking to do with this bill that would try to make sure that mental health was taken care of in the state of Georgia, that we had good institutions for taking care of that. But there was a lot of rhetoric in the bill that really needed to be corrected. There was rhetoric that would enable the state to involuntarily commit you without due process of law. And that was absolutely unacceptable to us. We said, no, you have to have the due process of law before your rights are removed. As an American citizen, but especially as a Georgia citizen, our focus here is Georgia, you cannot remove that exemption. It's something vitally important that we protect the due process of law. And so we got a lot of different references to different radical materials removed from that bill. Just a huge win. I can go to more details later on that. But got that bill cleaned up. Campus free speech was also passed. And you'll notice it's a long list because there were literally, it was a historic, there were major wins that we've been pushing for years. That obscenity piece of legislation to protect children has been in play for about 3 years now. And we've been engaged since day one on that. But super excited that was passed this year. Campus free speech. Representative Josh Bonner, who is serving in the National Guard and one of our foremost conservative leaders, he's the governor's floor leader in the House, one of the governor's floor leaders in the House, has been working to make sure that our campuses are protected. You know, the certain fringe elements of our society would tell you that it's okay to have free speech on campus. It's all right as long as it's in this little square, and as long as it's behind the parking deck over on the left side of campus where nobody gets to. And that's not protecting free speech on campus. That's creating a next generation of students who have been coddled, who have not been exposed to different ideas, and they're adults. We should be training adults with critical thinking skills, and we should be training adults ready and able to take on the next generation of leadership here in our state and our country. And so I'm so excited that we were able to pass campus free speech and make sure that the First Amendment rights of students on campus are protected here in the state of Georgia. Massive win. Also, vaccine passports is an issue that has been broached in our society. Many people have been pushing, especially in certain states, been pushing for the ability to say that unless you get a government mandated piece of medical care, that you are a second-class citizen, that you won't have the right to assemble in public places, you won't have the right to enter a public school, you won't have the right to be heard at public meetings, and that is unconscionable. That is absolutely unconscionable that the government would start segregating classes of society based on whether or not you were willing to accept a standard of care that the government was enforcing. So we worked with Senator Jeff Mullis to pass a piece of legislation that denied the government here in Georgia from being able to use any sort of vaccine passport to segregate society based on who will and who will not do what the government wants them to do. Yes, sir.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm just
Go ahead.
curious, does that affect the children going to elementary school, you know, with their
Yes, sir.
vaccination?
Yes, it does. It does. That is the local school is in a sense an agency of the government, the local government. But what the bill says is that no local government, state government agencies, any agency throughout the state is able to deny someone entry into a public area or a government building based on their vaccine status. So that is something that we were excited to partner with Senator Mullis to do. And another thing is on the tail of what he mentioned about our school children is whether or not our kids should be masked. Now we can have the debate on whether or not masks work, and there's a debate to be had there. I personally have my opinions on that, but it should not be the role of the government school to say, we are going to dictate to you the health and well-being of your child. That should not be the realm of the government school to do. And so we passed Senate Bill 514, worked with Senator Clint Dixon to pass what's called the Unmasked Georgia Students Act. Make sure that even if mandates are imposed, that the parent has the right to say, my child, there are health reasons involved, health reasons why kids shouldn't wear masks. There are a variety of other exemptions that should be taken into consideration, but at the end of the day, it is the parent's right to dictate the medical care of their child. And so I'm excited to work on that. And the reason I bring up all these different pieces of legislation, especially the ones that influence, that have an impact on our kids, is we probably would have had a great session without the work that we were able to do there with Frontline policy down at the Capitol. We probably have had a lot of these wins to a certain extent, but our group was able to start months before session with the Save Our Students agenda and promoting the fact that our kids are important. That in the midst of this time when radicalism is on the rise, and we can have all these debates about what should or should not be done in our country, we can have those debates in public forums as adults, We should not be having those debates in middle school classrooms. We should not be allowing teachers to come into middle school classrooms and radically politicize our kids. They should be educated, not indoctrinated. And so we started, like I said, months ahead of schedule, or months ahead of session, to say that our students should be saved from the indoctrination in the classroom, that we can have those debates outside the classroom, but inside the classroom, that should be saved for education. And so I'm so proud of the wins that we were able to accomplish. There's a lot of other things I could be talking about. We were able to, we weren't specifically a part of the effort to protect our Second Amendment rights. I personally am strongly supportive of that, but constitutional carry was passed in our state, and that's a huge win as well for Second Amendment protections. The tax refund that the governor spearheaded, making sure that the tax monies that were coming in, we had a huge surplus, and the governor said, look, it is only right and proper that if we have a surplus over what we budgeted, that we give that money back to the taxpayer. Mm-hmm. And now you've even seen Stacey Abrams jump up and say, hey, I think it's a good idea to give money back to the taxpayers. And so she's picked up on that, and the governor came in and said, look, under Joe Biden's economy, gas is astronomically expensive. It is hurting working families. I saw a report the other day that said that working families are paying on average $300 to $500 or more every month because of the gas prices, and $500 a month, $6,000 a year, that is no small amount. Mm-hmm. And so our governor here in Georgia said, we're going to do what we can. It costs the government of Georgia over $100 million a month to suspend the gas tax, but he worked with the legislature to do that. And so what do we hear a couple of weeks ago? But Stacey Abrams coming out and saying, well, I think what we should do here in Georgia is suspend the gas tax. That's what we should do here in Georgia. And the governor shouldn't just do it for 30 days. He should do it for a year. And I applaud her for picking up on good policy. It's nice to have some good policies for her to be picking up on. But it's illegal for him to do that for a year. He can only do it every 30 days. So she's going way outside the boundaries of the Constitution. She's pushing for a radical overreach. I'm excited about our governor's leadership. He has done a fantastic job. All of these wins I'm talking about wouldn't be possible without him. And one of the foremost things that our organization fights for is the right to life. And you want to talk about things that are unconscionable. I know I've mentioned that word a couple of times already. It is unconscionable that we are killing the most innocent among us. We're killing babies in the womb. And that is not a debate, in my opinion, that's not a debate to be had whether or not it's a baby. You can talk about whether or not you think the government has the right to do that. I think it's absolutely, there's no contest there. We can have that conversation as adults. But it's a baby. 95% of biologists, more than 95% of biologists have said in a University of Chicago poll that polled over 10,000 biologists, just in case you were wondering, I know a lot of people, nobody in this room probably is wondering that fact, life begins at conception. When a unique genetic code is created, there is a unique human being in the womb, and that life should be protected at every stage. And I bring that up because the heartbeat bill would be absolutely impossible without the leadership of Governor Brian Kemp. We would not have that bill. And so I know that there's room for policy arguments, policy debates about whether or not the governor's done this thing or whether or not he's done that thing. Folks, you should be enormously proud of the way that Governor Brian Kemp was willing to put his political career on the line. First year in office. And he said, our organization president, Cole Muzio, he was working with Governor Kemp while he was running, and I know that because I was on the governor's campaign team back then before I had met Cole. But Cole Muzio worked with Brian Kemp before he was elected to make the heartbeat pledge, to make the pledge that he would sign that bill into law. And the governor said, first year in office, he said, I've signed this pledge, life matters, life begins at conception, and we need to pass this bill. The day that bill was passed, we whipped it in the House and we had 83 votes. 83 votes to pass that bill. And you need the constitutional threshold is 91. You need 50% plus one in the House of Representatives here in Georgia to pass a bill into law. And so we were down by 8 votes easily, at least, if everyone voted. And the governor worked all throughout the day as the debates went on, and you heard people getting up and saying ridiculous things like God protects abortion and God wants you to have the right to kill your child from the other side of the aisle, but worked constantly nonstop to make sure that we had the votes for that. And passed it by an extraordinarily slim majority. And we have the ability now, post the Dobbs decision, to protect life in our state because of the leadership of Brian Kemp. And that's an amazing thing and one that we should be super proud of. So I just want to encourage you, with all that's been accomplished here in the legislature in the last year, to not give up hope, to realize that we still have a strong constitutional conservative, I'd say probably a majority of those even who are Republicans here, elected officials, they're strong constitutionalists, they're strong conservatives, and we may not agree on everything, but I will look you in the eye and I'll tell you they've fought for our values. No matter who you're talking about, 85-90% of the time, a lot of them 100% of the time, they've stood strong with us to make sure that our values are protected. Life is protected. Religious freedom is protected. Educational opportunity for every Georgia student is protected. So many of them are willing to do that. They fought alongside us. And so I'll just leave you with the encouragement to continue to engage. Engage with your neighbors. Engage with your friends. There's a lot of work left to be done if we want to make sure that we protect the constitutional conservatism that we've had the last 4 years. A lot of work left to be done here on the state level before November. We are hosting the United Frontline Gala in September. We're going to have one of the foremost defenders of American values here in the state, Mike Pompeo, who was Secretary of State under Donald Trump, stood up to the Iran regime, stood up to the regime in North Korea, and stood up for religious freedom around the world. One of the things I do for our local church, my local church there I actually go to church in Loganville, but is to bring a report every week about the state of the church generally, and persecution is on the rise under the Biden administration. When we have a failure of leadership at the top, then you have bad actors all over who immediately jump into that power vacuum and say, hey, if they're not going to call me out on it, I'm absolutely going to step up and do the worst I can do. And thanks to the leadership of Mike Pompeo under the Trump administration, persecution around the world went dramatically down, just because of the leadership that he showed. And so I say all that to say we'd love to have you at our United Frontline Gala in September. There's a pamphlet there on the back I'd love for everybody here to pick up. Got loads of them if we run out, so please feel free to grab that. We have an amazing slate of fall events. Not just the gala, we have a pro-life biblical citizenship academy where we're going to be talking about all the strategies for the pro-life movement post-Dobbs. What does it mean now that Roe is no longer the law of the land? What does it mean for the pro-life movement? What does it mean for your church? What does it mean for you personally? What does it mean for your community? So many of those questions are in the minds of people around the state and around our nation, and we are the resource to equip you to know what to do post-Dobbs, post-Roe, in a post-Roe America and a post-Roe Georgia. We're so excited for the win. What an awesome thing it is now that we can protect life. But if you would write down one web address, it's frontlinepolicy.com/fall events. Those are just two of the many different things we're going to be doing here in the late summer, early fall, to train citizens across Georgia on how to get engaged, how to engage effectively. We have to be smarter than the other side, we have to be stronger than the other side, and we have to be sweeter. We have to work and we have to be willing to say, look, the other side may be hurling insults, and there's a lot of people on our side who have gotten really passionate and allowed their passion to run away with them. We need to make sure that we are reaching out with love. And we need to make sure that we have the better, not only the better argument, but that we're reaching out across the aisle and doing so with love. So if you would check out our website, frontlinepolicy.com, and do we have a few minutes for me to take questions? Any questions on anything, legislative accomplishments, what our organization does? I've got a few minutes to take questions. So if you have anything, yes, ma'am.
I don't know whether I just read this, but I thought there was the heartbeat bill was in litigation.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So just a detail, and that is a very important detail. The heartbeat bill was passed in 2019. It was almost immediately enjoined in the legislative process. So currently it is not in effect, but the day that the Dobbs decision was handed down, our Attorney General Chris Carr filed for a motion of dismissal for that injunction, or actually motion of dissolution. Not the terms don't matter here, but basically what that would mean is the injunction would be removed and the heartbeat bill would go back into effect. So we're expecting any day now for the 11th Circuit to come down with a ruling that dismisses their injunction because they had enjoined it on the basis of Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And the Dobbs decision, praise the Lord, has removed those precedents from our Supreme Court jurisdiction in state and national law. So, yes, ma'am. Any other questions?
So
yes, sir.
Do you get funded just via donations? Or?
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that. That's a very important point. That's a very important point. It unfortunately takes resources to do anything. And our organization is, in fact, entirely donor funded. It's funded by the generosity of everybody here today. No, not, but of everybody who's willing to stand with our mission to protect family and Christian values here on a state level. We are not beholden to any interests. We are not beholden to any individuals. We say we're a distinctly Christian organization. We say that our number one shareholder is Christ himself. We are working to make sure that Christian values and that the Christian voice is elevated in politics, and that people are unafraid no matter what religion they are, but unafraid to be able to stand for their religious values. But that takes resources. Me being down at the Capitol every day of session, Cole being down at the Capitol every day of session, founding the Frontline Conservative Business Alliance, which is another thing we've done to elevate the voice of conservative business owners. And if you own a business, I'd really encourage you to check it out. We've got a luncheon for prospective members coming up here, where we're going to hear from some state leaders and state business leaders on the next steps for business here in Georgia, small businesses and large businesses alike. So I'd encourage you to check that out. You can see more details on our website, but that's coming up on August 23rd. But everything we do takes resources, so if there's anything that you can do, any donation of any size, we would really appreciate that. I encourage you to check out our events. All the money that comes in for those events, most of them are free, but a few of them, like the gala I was talking about, we do charge a price for that, and every dollar that comes in goes to defending your values here on a state level. So I would encourage you, thank you for the question. We are donor funded, so it's vitally important to us that we're able to continue the ministry and the work that we do. Any other questions? I think that's all. Yes, sir.
I had an opportunity to, my wife and I attended the Biblical Citizenship Academy in Cartersville.
Yes, sir.
I was so impressed with it that we tried to get it together at our local church in Necklace, but ended up having a scheduling conflict. But fortunately, they have put one together in October
We have,
in
yes.
Jefferson. If you have an opportunity, please go to that. It's like a one-day event, has some excellent speakers, doesn't cost you a thing, they even give you free lunch. But it's definitely worth your while to attend that if you can. And I don't remember exactly what the date was in October. But
October 22nd. Appreciate Charlie for mentioning that. If you'd like to come hear from legislators, local legislators here in the state, about what means most to them when they're talking to a constituent, what means most to them when they're having a discussion, either trying to solve a problem for a constituent or just listening to their concerns. How can you be the most effective, not only ambassador for Christ, if you're a believer, that's what you are first and foremost. How can you be an effective representative of your values when you're interfacing with politicians, when you're trying to build support in the community, when you're on a campaign? If you have questions about any of that, we would love for you to come out to Jefferson on October 22nd. It's a Saturday. It starts at 9 in the morning, goes till 3 in the afternoon. You're going to hear from a variety of powerful speakers. It's a free event. Like Charlie said, we can provide you lunch, and it's a good lunch too. And as a man who always loves a free meal, especially in Biden's economy, right? I can promise you that the food's good and the fellowship is even better. It's a powerful event. We'd love to have your presence there, and you can find out all the details and register for that event. We do ask folks to register, even though it's free, to make sure we get an accurate head count for lunch. Find out the details at frontlinepolicy.com/fall events. And as I said, October 1st, before that, we're going to have one on the other side of Atlanta. It's at Church of the Apostles. That's the pro-life Biblical Citizenship Academy I was telling you about. Love to have you for that one as well. That's going to be premier event for training activists all over the state and training regular folks on what does it look like post-rep. Any other questions I can answer for y'all? All right, well, it's been a pleasure being here. I appreciate y'all having me. Sorry Cole couldn't be here. Sorry I had to fill in for him, but I'll be around afterwards if you have any more questions. Appreciate y'all having me.